My girlfriend and I were on a romantic getaway in Italy after a few months of emotional distance caused by work. In the last few days, she suddenly wanted to stay without me, despite all our plans together. So I cut her off financially and left. Here's the situation: my girlfriend and I had been together for 2 years before the chaos of my current job began. Life with Jay, my girlfriend, was pretty much like something out of a feel-good movie. We met at a friend's barbecue and hit it off immediately. She had this easy laugh and a way of seeing the funny side of everything that made every day a little brighter. We spent countless evenings just walking around the park, cooking together, or watching movies. We were that couple. Always holding hands, always planning the next fun thing. Back then, my work was a predictable 9 to 5, so I always had plenty of time for us. But as things picked up at work and I transitioned into a more demanding role, our relationship started to shift. It was subtle at first. First, I missed a dinner date here, canceled plans there. I told myself it was just a busy phase, that I'd get back in control of my schedule. Jay was understanding too, always saying she understood that work was important. But no matter how supportive she tried to be, I could tell it was taking a toll on her. The last 2 months really showed how much strain our relationship had endured. My new normal meant more late nights, unexpected calls on the weekends, and constant emails from home. We saw less of each other, and when we did, the exhaustion and stress were palpable. What used to be our downtime had become short, often silent meals, with both of us glued to our phones. The intimacy that came so easily now felt like something we had to schedule, like another task on my to-do list. These changes had created an undercurrent of tension. Jay, once so relaxed and jovial, now snapped over little things like running out of milk or leaving a wet towel on the bed. We argued over these trivialities, but there was always an unspoken, heavier air about the time we spent together. We hadn't had a big fight yet, nothing that dramatic, but there was this nagging feeling of drifting apart, like we were slowly losing touch with what had brought us together. Realizing the toll my job was taking on Jay and me, I knew something had to change. I could see the strain in her eyes, the way her smile didn't reach as far as it used to. It was like watching the paint fade from a vibrant painting. Guilt nagged at me, a constant reminder that I wasn't there for her as much as I should have been. She never complained much, but love doesn't need words to express when something's amiss. I decided to plan a vacation, something grand. A big gesture to show Jay how much she meant to me and maybe salvage what was left of our once effortless connection. Italy seemed like the perfect escape, with its romantic landscapes, rich history, and promise of delicious food. It was somewhere Jay had mentioned wanting to visit in our simpler days. I imagined us strolling the streets of Rome, riding a gondola in Venice, and sipping wine under the Tuscan sun, recapturing the magic we had lost to routine and tired late-night work. I made all the arrangements, secretly booking our flights and hotels to ensure a seamless, stress-free experience. When I finally told Jay about the trip, the surprise ignited a spark in her that I hadn't felt in months. The essence of Italy seeped into every moment of our trip, and it seemed like each day offered a new adventure, a new opportunity to bridge the gap that had formed between us. One evening in Venice stands out in my memory. We had booked a small boat to take us through the winding canals at dusk. The setting sun cast a warm golden glow over the ancient buildings and the water, painting the sky in oranges and pinks. The gondolier skillfully maneuvered us under low bridges and along colorful, slightly sloping canals. Jay and I sat close, our hands intertwined, with the sounds of distant chatter and the gentle splash of water against the boat filling the air. There was a peace in that moment, a serenity and contentment I hadn't felt in months. She rested her head on my shoulder, and it felt like we were the only two people in the world. Another highlight was our romantic dinner at a quaint little restaurant in Rome, tucked away in a narrow alley lined with ivy-covered walls. The restaurant was Jay's find. She had read about it in one of her travel blogs. We dined outside under a string of little lights, the atmosphere buzzing with the soft murmurs of other diners and the clinking of glasses. We indulged in a meal of fresh pasta drizzled with a truffle sauce that was nothing short of divine, paired with a bottle of local red wine. Our waiter recommended it, and Jay's eyes sparkled under the lights as we talked about plans for the future, about places we still wanted to see and about starting fresh. When we returned home for a few hours, it felt like we had recaptured the magic of our early days together, laughing and sharing stories with an ease that I had missed. Those moments, so full of promise and rediscovery, made the sudden change on our last day all the more jarring. As we stood on that cliff in Naples, with the vast blue sea stretching out before us, I couldn't help but feel that the picturesque scene was mocking us. It presented a stark contrast to the turmoil unfolding between us. A person's life can't really be like this, I thought. Then she dropped the bombshell. Out of nowhere, Jay told me she needed more time in Italy, without me. She told me she wanted to stay longer to find herself and think about our relationship. I was stunned. There had been no conversation about feeling trapped or unhappy, not like that. Up until that moment, I thought we were healing, getting better, finding our way back to each other. But her words made it clear she hadn't planned this with me, hadn't even hinted at her need for more space until that moment. It felt like a betrayal, not only of the plans we'd made together but also of the trust we had built. I felt a mix of emotions swirling inside me, anger, confusion, but mostly a deep sadness. Here I thought we were mending our relationship, while she was apparently still questioning everything about us. The idea of leaving her there tore at me, but so did the feeling of being so unexpectedly cast aside. It was supposed to be our trip, our time to reconnect, and now it was ending with her choosing to stay behind and go on without me. This wasn't just a small hiccup, it felt like a seismic shift in my thinking about our future. The conversation quickly escalated from her initial bombshell. Standing there, overlooking the Mediterranean, the salt air mixing with the tension between us, I struggled to keep my composure. I had to react, to say something, because silence would only mean acceptance of her sudden plan without any consideration of what it meant for both of us. So, as calmly as I could muster, I addressed the financial side of her decision. It was a decision she had made alone, but one that would affect both of us. Jay, I began, trying to keep my voice even, I want to support you in finding whatever it is you're looking for, but if this is something you have to do alone, then I think it's only fair that you take on the financial responsibility for it as well. I explained that the trip as planned was something I could budget for, but extending it was beyond what I had anticipated. As Jay's voice grew louder against the backdrop of the cliff, her words cut through the gentle hum of the waves below. The tension was palpable, and her accusations stung deeply. Can you just cut me off like this? Is this how you show your love, by holding money over my head? Her eyes, usually so warm and inviting, now flashed with a mixture of frustration and despair. I tried to control my own emotions without escalating the situation. Jay, this isn't about money, I replied, my voice calm but firm. It's about us, about commitment. If you say you need to stay longer without me, it feels like there's something more, something you're not telling me. The accusation stung, and I repeated, this wasn't about money. Not really. It was about boundaries, respect for the choices we were supposed to make together. This trip was supposed to be a gesture of healing, not a gateway to a unilateral decision that leaves me feeling left out, both financially and emotionally. Overwhelmed, she averted her eyes. I could see the gears of her mind turning as she weighed the implications of her desires versus the realities of our relationship. The air between us felt heavy with unspoken things and unresolved emotions. I took a deep breath and tried to read between the lines of what she wasn't quite saying, but the idea that she needed time alone there now seemed to indicate something more than just soul searching. Jay, will you tell me everything? I asked gently, hoping to draw out what was really on her mind. We ended the conversation with no real resolution, the uncertainty hanging over us like a dark cloud. She was hurt and felt unsupported in her moment of need for independence. I was confused and upset, feeling like the one left holding the pieces while she was off looking for something I couldn't give her. It was on these cliffs that we spent our last night, in silence, each lost in our own thoughts, wondering what the next step would be for a relationship that had just faced one of its toughest tests. When I returned from Italy, the tension between Jay and me hadn't eased. But the addition of our friends' opinions only made things worse. It started with a few off-hand comments during a group video call. One of our mutual friends, Mark, mentioned that he had heard about our small disagreement, minimizing the situation. The discussion quickly spiraled from there. Dude, you left her in Italy. That's harsh, Mark said, shaking his head. His tone was more accusatory than concerned. Another friend, Lisa, chimed in. I mean, I get that you're upset, but cutting her off financially? That seems a little extreme. Her words stung. These were people who knew us both, who knew our dynamic and the struggles we'd been going through lately. And yet it seemed they only saw Jay's side of the situation. They weren't there to see the confusion and hurt in my eyes when she told me she wanted to stay. They didn't feel the weight of betrayal I felt, and my efforts to repair our relationship were met with a sudden demand for space and independence. I tried to explain my side, to tell them how blindsided I was, how we had planned this trip together as a couple, and how her sudden decision felt like a step away from everything we were working on. It's not about the money, I insisted. It's about being left out of a major decision that affects both of us. It's about feeling like I'm not a partner, I'm just a provider. The conversation went back and forth, but it didn't go far. Their minds seemed fixed, and the more I tried to defend my position, the more defensive I sounded, which only seemed to confirm their criticism. The call ended in awkward silence, and I felt isolated not only from Jay but also from my friends. This rift made me question a lot of things, not just my relationship with Jay but also my friendships. It felt like they were quick to judge without understanding the full complexity of the situation. Or maybe I wondered if I had failed to communicate the depth of my feelings effectively. Either way, I felt cornered and misunderstood, caught between defending my boundaries and appearing insensitive to the people whose opinions mattered to me. It was a precarious balance, trying to maintain my self-respect while navigating the disapproval of friends I once counted on for support. Update: Wow, I can't believe that my situation got the attention of so many of you. Well, thank you for all your advice. A month had passed since Jay decided to extend her stay in Italy, a decision that stretched the fabric of our relationship to its limits. Our communications were marked by a tense exchange of short, cold messages, sometimes days apart. I had hoped the distance would bring some perspective, perhaps soften the edges of the conflict we had left behind. But as her return approached, a knot of anxiety grew inside me, tightening with each passing day. She didn't call to let me know she was coming. I just heard the key turn in the lock of our apartment. The sound, once a signal of comfort, now struck a chord of apprehension as she stepped inside. The air was heavy with the weight of unspoken grievances and pent-up frustrations. She looked different, tired. Yes, but there was also a hardness about her, in her eyes and the set of her jaw, an armor she had grown during her time away. The door had barely closed behind her before the storm broke. "You just cut me off like that," Jay's voice was sharp. Her words rang through the tense air, her bags falling to the floor with a thud that mirrored the heavy fall of my heart. I had not cut her off financially without warning. I had stated during our last painful conversation in Naples that if she wanted to stay longer, she would have to do so at her own expense. But it seemed that she had either misunderstood or chosen to reinterpret the facts. "I didn't cut you off," I replied, trying to keep my tone even despite the rising tide of emotion. "I said that if you decided to stay longer, you'd have to do it without my financial support. You made that decision, not me." "Stranded in a foreign land," she exclaimed, her face flushed with anger. The moment she looked at me, the accusation in her eyes felt like a slap, harsh and unfounded. This was the breaking point after weeks of tension and uncertainty. "I didn't leave you, Jay. You chose to stay," I retorted, my voice rising to match hers. "We already had a return ticket booked." I felt betrayed not only by her decision to extend her stay without consulting me, but now by her twisting of the facts. It was as if the careful plans I had made to bring us closer had been forgotten and discarded. Like an inconvenient truth, the argument escalated. Jay paced back and forth across the living room, each step seemed to echo her escalating frustration. "You could have supported me, understood that I needed more time," she argued, throwing her hands up in despair. "And you could have communicated with me about it, Jay." "Communication goes both ways," I shot back. The gap in our perspectives seemed insurmountable. I had envisioned our discussion as an opportunity to air our grievances and seek understanding, maybe even find a way to mend the rift between us. But instead, it devolved into a volley of accusations and hurt feelings. As we argued, the pain became palpable, filling the space between us with words and equally heavy silence. The room felt smaller, as if the walls were closing in during this moment of our disagreement. I could see the strain in her eyes, mirroring my own fatigue. It was emotionally draining. This dance of stubbornness and pride hurt more because it was with Jay, the person I had once been so in tune with. Finally, with neither of us willing to budge, Jay grabbed her purse and keys. "I can't do this right now," she said, her voice tight. "I need some space to think, away from here." Without another word, she left the apartment to stay with a friend. The door slammed shut with a final thud, marking the physical and emotional distance now fully imposed between us. The weeks following Jay's departure were a haze of confusion and melancholy. I tried to keep myself busy, throwing myself into work and avoiding our mutual friends as much as possible. I wasn't ready to face the questions or the pitying looks. It was during one of those long evenings when I left the office later than usual that I ran into Ben, a close friend who was more like a brother to me. "Hey, man." Ben greeted me, his expression uncomfortable, as if he was wrestling with something he wasn't sure what to say. We decided to grab a coffee and found ourselves sitting facing each other in a quiet cafe that was about to close for the night. The faint buzz of the few remaining customers filled the air. Ben hesitated, stirring his coffee slowly. Look, I wasn't going to say anything. At first, I thought it wasn't my place, and maybe it isn't. He trailed off, then looked up at me with a serious expression. "I heard from Eve that she's close to one of Jay's friends, you know. Jay's been doing well. She borrowed a lot of money from friends and family when she was in Italy." I felt a knot forming in my stomach. Jay, who I knew was financially prudent to a fault. Ben continued, "Yeah, and there's more. She said she partied a lot over there and got pretty wild." He paused, the weight of his next words hanging between us. "She met someone. Something happened, and now she's back here and she's pregnant." The news hit me like a physical blow. Each word was a punch that knocked the wind out of me. My mind raced as I tried to piece together the fragments of this new reality. But Ben wasn't done. "There's talk that she's planning to make a scene, to claim that the child is yours, to get you to take responsibility." I was stunned into silence. The coffee in front of me had gone cold. It felt surreal, like a plot from one of those overly dramatic TV shows that Jay and I used to watch together and criticize for being too unrealistic. But this was real, and it was happening to me. Why would she do this? I finally managed to ask, my voice a mixture of shock and disbelief. "I don't know, man," Ben replied, shaking his head. "She's desperate, maybe. She's not thinking straight. I just thought you should know, from someone who cares about you." I thanked Ben, my mind a whirlwind of emotions as I left the cafe that night. The air felt colder as I walked home. The streets were empty, echoing with the footsteps of my lonely return. Betrayal, confusion, pain, it was all there, building up inside me. What was I going to do? How could I confront Jay? The trust we had built over the years seemed to crumble in an instant, leaving me to deal with the wreckage of our shared past and an uncertain, possibly contentious future. The days after my conversation with Ben were a blur of sleepless nights and distracted days. The seed of doubt he had planted grew into an overwhelming tangle of suspicion and uncertainty. Was Jay really going to betray me so deeply? Or was this all some kind of misunderstanding? I needed answers, and I needed them before Jay could make any moves. I started talking to our mutual friends, casually bringing up Jay and trying to gauge their reactions. I'd steer the conversation toward our relationship, watching carefully for any signs of discomfort or evasiveness that might indicate they knew more than they were telling. Despite my best efforts, nothing of substance came out of these interactions. It was as if Ben's story was an echo in a void, leaving me more isolated and frustrated with my worries. But undeterred, I decided to take a more direct approach with someone who would know the truth, Kay, one of Jay's closest friends. She had always been honest with me, never one to mince words or shield her thoughts behind polite facades. If anyone would tell me the truth, it would be her. I approached Kay under the guise of needing advice on how to deal with Jay, an excuse that wasn't entirely false. We met in a small, cozy cafe with a comforting buzz that made it easier to open up. As we sat down with our coffee, the casual beginning quickly changed. "I've heard some things, and I just want to understand what's going on with Jay," I began, my voice steady, but my hands betraying my nervousness. I watched Kay's face carefully. Her expression changed from friendly concern to a more guarded weariness. What have you heard? She asked, her tone cautious yet curious. I hesitated, then decided to tell her everything. I was worried that she might think I was trying to set a trap for Jay, or that she might try to make me believe that I'm responsible for a situation I had no part in creating. But I needed the truth. Kay listened intently. When I finished, she let out a long sigh. Things aren't what they seem, she said. Her demeanor changed as she continued. Her eyes were fixed somewhere outside the window, perhaps finding it easier not to meet my gaze directly at such a difficult moment. And there's something else you should know, she added, turning back to look at me. Her expression was a mixture of sympathy and determination. After Jay realized she was pregnant, she panicked. Given everything, she didn't know how to handle it. So she had a paternity test done, just to be sure, you know. Kay's voice was calm, but her hands fidgeted with the coffee cup in front of her. The results came back, and you were not the father. She was shocked, and well, the Italian guy is out of the picture. Kay paused, giving me a moment to absorb the news. My last hope that the baby could be mine faded away. Jay had been looking for confirmation. She got it, and yet here we are. She's really scared. She doesn't know what to do next. And I think in her panic, she thought that maybe turning to you would somehow fix things. Maybe she thought that the baby could be yours and that would make things easier for her. Kay looked genuinely pained to be breaking such news. Her loyalty to Jay was clearly at odds with her moral compass to tell the truth. I'm telling you this because I think you deserve the whole picture. It's a mess, I know, but Jay's really struggling with what to do next. She mentioned that she wants your help, not just financially, but emotionally. Maybe she was hoping there was a chance this situation might bring you back together. It's not fair to you, and I thought you should know the truth before things went any further. I sat back and tried to process everything Kay had laid out. I could see the complexity of Jay's actions, driven by fear and a desperate grasp for stability. The paternity revelation just added another layer of betrayal and sadness to the situation. This wasn't just about breaking our relationship. Now it was about the potential consequences of her decisions on an innocent life. Thanks, Kay, for being honest with me, I said, finally finding my voice after a long silence. This changes a lot. I need some time to think about all this, about what I want to do and how I can handle this situation without making things worse for everyone involved. Kay nodded, understanding the gravity of the moment. Of course. Take all the time you need. If you need to talk more or if you need anything, I'm here. As I left the cafe, the cool air felt sharp. The news had not only clarified but complicated the situation more than ever. Now, more than ever, it was crucial to take the next steps with careful thought and consideration for all parties involved, especially the unborn child caught in the middle of this turmoil. I wasn't sure what to do. One part of me wanted to confront Jay, to demand explanations and maybe get her side of the story, as painful as that might be. Another part of me wanted to withdraw, to process the information and protect myself from further pain. Any logical step I could take from here, seek legal counsel, prepare for potential litigation, distancing myself from Jay, seemed cold and clinical, far away from the emotional rage boiling inside me. By the time I reached my apartment, the sun had set. The early darkness felt like a fitting reflection of the uncertainty that lay ahead. The decision of what to do next loomed large, daunting in its significance. As I turned my key in the lock, the familiar sound seemed strangely foreign, as if even my sense of home questioned where I belonged. The quiet of my apartment was a stark contrast to the storm of thoughts in my head. I sat down, alone with the echo of Kay's last words. After 3 days of agonizing over everything, I decided it was time to face Jay. I needed clarity and closure, no matter how painful the process would be. I texted her and asked if we could meet at the little coffee shop where we'd spent countless lazy Sunday afternoons together. It felt like a neutral place, public yet intimate, suitable for the kind of serious conversation we needed to have. She was already there when I arrived. Her red, rimmed eyes were a clear sign that she had been crying. When I sat across from her, the air felt heavy with all the things left unsaid between us. I know everything, Jay, I began, trying to keep my voice calm despite the turmoil inside me. I know about the guy in Italy, about the pregnancy, and your plan to make me believe I could be the father. Her face crumpled at my words. I was so confused, she managed to say, her voice a whisper. I thought that if you thought the baby was yours, we could go back to the way things were. The pain was palpable, stinging like a reopened wound. Jay, we can't. Trust doesn't work that way, I replied, feeling a strange mix of anger and pity. And I can't just overlook this. There was a long pause, filled only with the soft murmur of other customers and the clinking of coffee cups. Finally, I took a deep breath and continued. I've decided to help you. I'll pay off your debts from the trip. It's the last thing I can do for you out of whatever love and care there is left. Jay began to sob, shaking her shoulders. It was hard to watch, knowing how deeply intertwined our lives had been. But after this, we have to go our separate ways, I added. It was a decision I made, not out of compassion for her alone, but as a way to free myself from guilt, from a relationship that had become too fractured to mend. As hard as it had been, I knew it was the right move towards healing, towards not letting this situation hold me back any longer. As I stood up to leave, the finality of the moment sunk in. Jay had been a significant part of my life, but it was clear that this chapter had to end. I felt a weight lift off of me, a sad relief knowing that this was a necessary end for both of us to move forward. As I reflect on the journey I've shared with all of you here, I would like to extend a heartfelt thank you to everyone who took the time to comment and offer your support and advice. Your words have been a beacon during a tumultuous time, guiding me through moments of doubt and encouraging me when the path seemed too difficult to navigate alone. The wisdom shared in the comments was not only invaluable in helping me make informed decisions, but also provided comfort, reminding me that I was not alone in this struggle. Many of you shared your own stories, reminding me that life's trials are universal, yet they also bring us together in understanding and empathy. I am especially grateful to those who reminded me to stay true to my values and to face this situation with integrity and compassion. The reminders to protect my emotional well-being and to seek professional help were critical in navigating the complexities of this situation. Also, thanks for the reminders about self-care and the encouragement to move forward after making difficult decisions. These messages helped me maintain perspective and focus on the path to healing. To everyone who commented, your support made a real difference in my life during this difficult time. I am moving forward with a renewed sense of purpose and hope, buoyed by the kindness and wisdom of this community. Thank you for being part of my journey.